morning. This is Trish Kane, founder of Healerverse. Happy Friday. You already know, on Fridays, we do the Healerverse Roundtable where we feature one of the verified Healerverse practitioners so you can find out what they do, what's out there, different healing modalities, and who's doing what and who's around you. We love Fridays because we love bringing everybody together. And the website is 5dhealerverse.com. If you haven't yet, sign up. Today we have a most amazing practitioner. He's a legend, Dr. Mike. And he was actually at the Miami event that we did during Miami Swim Week last year, so you may recognize him. He's a Florida living man. So if you want to meet up with him in real life, you can find him on Healerverse and send him a message and book with him. He will be telling you the rest about him because I like for people to introduce themselves, but that's my little blurb in the beginning. And here we go. Welcome, Mike.
Yay! Thank you.
Nice
And
to see you. I'm so happy to see you. It's been a while.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
so I like to start with since we have a whole hour. What I like to do is to start with a little bit of background, but mostly on how I got into this field and where I am today, and then go into our R4 method. And most of it at the end, I would like to share several practical tips for people to implement immediately. So it's not just a whole theoretical hour, right? We like to get some pearls of wisdom and start implementing those immediately. But you just said about introducing, and I'm starting to, as I get older, introduce myself differently, because when people introduce me, they often mention things like world record holder swimming, healthcare practitioner, best-selling author, entrepreneur, keynote speaker. And I'm grateful for all those experiences because they have shaped my life in meaningful ways. But if I'm honest, the most important lessons I've learned didn't come from any of those accomplishments. They came through loss, they came through relationships, they came through the moments when life forced me to stop running and start paying attention, right? And so for much of my life, I was driven by achievement. I grew up in Belgium and discovered at a young age that I actually loved competition, and swimming became my passion. And what I loved most was the certainty of it, because if I trained harder, I improved. And if I improved, I would perform better. And if I performed better, I would win more races, right? And so the relationship between effort and outcome was clear and predictable. And that mindset has served me well throughout the years. It helped me become a world class athlete. It helped me earn multiple healthcare degrees. It helped me build successful small businesses, write books, and create opportunities that I could never have imagined as a young boy standing on the edge of a swimming pool. So from the outside, it looked like success, and in many ways it was. But yet, looking back, I can see that much of my life was driven by a question that I even didn't know I was asking. And that question is, am I enough? And I don't think that's a question unique to me. I think many people spend their lives asking it without realizing it. We ask it through our careers, through our accomplishments, through our bank accounts, our titles, our achievements, and our ability to provide for others. So the problem is that accomplishment can never permanently answer a question that was never about accomplishment in the first place. So life eventually taught me that lesson. And one of the biggest turning points came when my younger brother passed away at the age of 24. Because no amount of education or professional training prepared me for that experience. And what I remember most is the strange contrast between what was happening inside of me and what was happening around me. Because the world kept moving and work continued, responsibilities remained, life appeared unchanged. Inside, however, something had shifted. And like many high performers, I responded the way I always had. I didn't know how to respond otherwise. I stayed busy, I focused on work, I handled what needed to be handled. And from the outside, it probably looked like I was doing well. But looking back, I realized I was functioning, but I wasn't necessarily healing. And that distinction changed my life because many of us become incredibly skilled, especially the professionals, at functioning. We show up, we perform, we meet expectations, we solve problems, right? But yet, emotional pain doesn't disappear simply because we keep moving. It waits patiently beneath the surface until we are willing to acknowledge it. Over the years, I even lost several more childhood friends as well, and each loss reinforced the same lesson. Life is fragile, and the things we take for granted can disappear far more quickly than we can imagine. And those experiences began changing the questions I was asking myself. Instead of asking, how do I become more successful? I found myself asking, what does it actually mean to live a meaningful life? Instead of asking, how do I achieve more? I began asking, who am I beneath everything I have achieved? And those questions eventually led me toward one of the most important relationships of my life, my partner, Joellen. When she came into my life, I thought I knew myself very well. After all, I had spent decades studying human behavior, health, wellness, and personal development. And what I discovered was that knowledge and self awareness are not the same thing. Joellen helped me see patterns within myself that I had never fully recognized. My tendency to stay busy, my desire to solve problems immediately, my discomfort with uncertainty, my discomfort with stillness. Behaviors that appear to be strengths on the surface often prevented me from fully experiencing what was happening underneath. So for the first time, I became less interested in improving my performance and more interested in understanding the person behind this performance. And that shift started changing everything. A year or two later, another experience deepened that understanding even further. After almost 50 years, I reconnected with my biological father. For most of my life, my father existed more as an idea than as an actual person. I actually had built an entire story around his absence without realizing how much that story had shaped me and influenced me over all these years. And when we finally, and this was the last year, sat across from each other, something unexpected happened. I wasn't overwhelmed by anger. I wasn't even interested in assigning blame. Instead, I found myself becoming very curious. I began seeing him not through the eyes of a child searching for answers, but through the eyes of a man who had experienced his own failures, regrets, hopes, and lessons. And that experience taught me something profound about forgiveness. Because for years, as many of us, we believed that forgiveness is something we offer another person. And today, most of us, I believe, see that differently, right? Forgiveness is a gift we give ourselves. It frees us from carrying emotional burdens that no longer serve us. So that reunion with my father didn't change the past, but it changed my relationship to the past. And that made all the difference. Around the same time, my professional interests were evolving as well. I became increasingly fascinated by a question I encountered repeatedly in my work and with my colleagues. And that question was, why do some people transform while others remain stuck at that same level? And many of the people I worked with already knew what they should do. They understood nutrition, wellness, mindfulness, exercise, stress management, healthy habits, and so on. Yet, information alone rarely creates lasting change. And so the more I studied neuroscience, trauma, stress physiology, and human behavior, the more I realized that transformation begins with awareness. Before people can change their beliefs, they must first recognize it, right? Before they can release an emotional burden, they must become aware that they are carrying it. Before healing can occur, something that remained hidden must become visible. And so, what fascinated me was that modern science and ancient wisdom and spiritual traditions seem to finally be arriving at remarkably similar conclusions. And science helped me explain all those mechanisms, while spirituality explored the experience and the embodiment of it. but both pointed toward the importance of awareness. Both emphasized the power of presence. Both suggested that many of the limitations we experience are not inherent to who we are, but rather the result of stories and patterns and conditioning accumulated over the years. And when I look back on my own life, I can see this principle everywhere, right? The loss of my brother exposed grief I had avoided. My relationship with Joellen revealed patterns I had never examined before, and reconnected with my father challenged stories I had carried since childhood and shaped my life. In each case, awareness came first and then transformation followed. So today, if there's one message I hope people take away from my work and experience, it's this: you are not your achievements. You are not your failures. You are not the stories you have been telling yourself. And you are not the masks that you learn to wear to survive, to succeed, to feel safe, or to gain acceptance. Because beneath all of that exists something deeper. And you can call it consciousness or God or awareness, spirit, soul, or your authentic self. The label matters far less than the experience itself. What matters is recognizing that this deeper part of you has been there all along. It was there way before the world told you who you should become, and it remains there right now, and it still will be there long after many of the roles and identities that you currently cling to have changed. So for much of my life, I thought growth meant becoming more. And today, obviously, I see this differently. I believe the deepest form of growth is remembering who we are beneath the conditioning, remembering who we are beneath the fear, remembering who we are beneath all the striving. And if life has taught me anything, it is that the path home begins the moment we stop searching everywhere else and finally are willing and have the courage to look within. And so the greatest misconceptions, according to me, about humanity or being human is that strength is measured by how much we can endure and suppress and can control or carry on our own. Because some of the strongest people I have ever met, man and woman, are those willing to go inward. Because it takes courage to sit in stillness when every instinct wants distraction. It takes courage to feel emotions and go through emotions that have been buried for decades. And it takes courage to stop blaming circumstances and other people or the past and instead take radical responsibility for your own life. And the journey inward is therefore not for the weak. It requires the willingness to examine the stories we have inherited, the masks we have learned to wear, the wounds that we have spent years avoiding. And yet it is precisely through that process of awakening that we become more authentic, more present, and more aligned with who we truly are. And in my experience, a real human, a real man or woman is not defined by how well he or she hides his pain, but by the willingness to face it, to learn from it, and transform it into wisdom. Because as we release that fear, that resentment, that shame, and those old identities, we naturally elevate our energy, our awareness, and the frequency, the level of consciousness from which we live. So we become less reactive, more conscious, and more capable of leading ourselves and others with clarity, compassion, and purpose. And that's why I'm here today, Trish, to share that with people.
Can I just intervene for 2 seconds? And I want to
Yeah.
commend you. Not everybody comes out of the gate like you do. Some people take a minute to warm up, and like I am so inspired right now. Like this has been already so powerful, and we're only 20 minutes in. So I'm excited right now, and we need more of this. We need more of Dr. Mike. Dr. Mike everywhere, literally. Oh, good morning, everybody. How does everybody else feel after this so far? Like, you know?
I was hoping that you are getting a transcription of this because I was trying to take notes and it's just
Of course.
it's just too much. Oh, I couldn't keep up with all that wisdom.
We'll break it down in the next segments, I guess.
Yeah, and God is just like flowing through you. God, whatever. But you really just hit the nail on the head too. Once you start going inward and you start to heal and grow and thrive, Like, and thriving doesn't always feel good, but like growing and healing is thriving, right? It just becomes natural and you need more and want more, right? And sometimes it ebbs and flows too, but I can tell that you've done a lot of work on yourself. And I also love your beloved. She's amazing. So I'm so happy to hear that personal story of what she has brought to you and brought out in you and vice versa. And yeah, and I think this is relatable for everybody here too, right? It's like, how many degrees can I get? How much stuff can I accomplish? How many things can I do? How many this, that, the other thing? And when we are able to pause and reflect and also like celebrate the things that we have done and kind of say, okay, like, how do I go inward in order to find out what I really want to do instead of what I was told to do? And kind of, I like to give the example of like a parrot. You know how they kind of like will repeat stuff that they hear? It's like, do I actually believe this? And I'm saying it. Yeah, that's what I
Yeah,
think.
100% correct. We create those masks from young on, from a baby, right? We seek safety, and so that subconscious programming starts from day one, and then we carry those masks to fulfill our needs and make sure we're safe. And that's all about safety and acceptance. And so you fulfill those roles, but that's not you underneath. And once you realize that, you turn inward because life's too short not to experience true life instead of playing those roles, and disconnect from the matrix and realize that you're not just a person in the movie or in the book, but you're the creator, and you can start taking control of that life and create whatever you want. And that's the big difference, I think.
Yeah, yeah. And so I know, like, we spoke about consciousness and awareness. Do you want to tell us a little bit about the R4 method that you created? Regulate, release, rewire, and rise?
Yes, so when I learn and I go to retreats and I get all this information, usually I need to make sense of it and connect the dots, right? So many times what I do, first of all, I write books. This is my latest book, Science and Soul of Human Life. But the reason I write books is not to sell them because I don't make any money on it. Amazon makes the money, but I don't. So that's not even the reason. And if people read it, great. Hopefully they take something away. But the reason I write books is for myself to connect the dots and do a little bit more research on the topics that don't make sense in my mind yet. And once I finish the book, everything is clear for me. So for me, writing a book is almost a process for myself, right? And so the R4 method is something I developed while I was writing this last book. It's basically all this information about consciousness, about regulating the nervous system, about releasing somatically emotional trauma, about rewiring your subconscious mind. How does it all fit into each other? And so I actually made one graph, one piece of paper to connect all that, a diagram. You can find it for free on my website. And from that, the R4 method was born, which is basically a framework that people kind of can follow to actually work on all those aspects at the same time, because it's too much information and we don't know, where do I start? And so the R4 method is a framework that I developed that people can start following. So you can see it on my screen, right? Regulate, release, rewire, and rise. So we start with regulate, and I'll explain each one of them just for a few minutes so I have a good idea on what we're talking about. But regulate is about regulating the nervous system, right? So this is about establishing safety and stability. It's to escape the chronic flight, fight, and freeze. And you all heard of those nervous system states, right? Most of us are in sympathetic drive. We're always going, striving. But to the nervous system, that's running away from that Bengal tiger. And ultimately, it's going to lead to burnout, right? So, and a lot of people get stuck there. But if we can't run anymore, or we can't really escape that tiger anymore, then we get into a freeze state. And that's basically, we don't care anymore, there's nothing we can do. We're kind of locked in. And both states are not good. What we need to do as humans is be able to fluently, move from one nervous system state into another. And today, science can measure that with HRV, heart rate variability. The higher that number, the more you can, not control, but manage your movement throughout the nervous system. So the first thing we need to do is be able to regulate our own nervous system, not just short term, but also in the long term, to build capacity to handle life with presence and calm. And that's where consciousness, we'll talk about consciousness a little bit later, but that's where increasing your level of consciousness comes in. Because if you don't react to situations and you look at situations and be able to hold those different points of view, especially in politics, etc., right? Then obviously, you increase your capacity, and it's all to do with nervous system regulation. And that's why it's step number one, because it's the foundation to deeper transformation, right? If you cannot regulate your nervous system and you don't expand your capacity, there's nothing you can hold. There's no transformation possible because you're going to continue to be reactive. And so within that nervous system, we have our peripheral nervous system, which is the sympathetic, parasympathetic. So you need to learn to easily shift in a matter of seconds from sympathetic to parasympathetic and vice versa, going from being active and being activated, which sometimes we need to do. For example, exercise is important, but that's a sympathetic state. But we also need to be able to easily roll over into the parasympathetic state, which is our rest, digest, our healing state, right? We can do that with many tools, like vagus nerve activation, breathwork, etc. So there's many tools that we can utilize to regulate that nervous system. And then what most people don't talk about when we talk about nervous system is our central nervous system. And that's actually pretty cool because, as you know, our central nervous system holds our cerebrospinal fluid. It's our spine and our encephalon, which is outside in our brain. And that fluid is kind of a buffer to protect our central nervous system. But what most people don't realize, and that's where science and soul become so close together, and it's so fascinating if you start kind of comparing the science and making sense of that ancient wisdom. And this is one of those examples, so I'm already excited and I didn't share it yet, but the cerebrospinal fluid is basically salts and proteins. And when we put salts and proteins together, we get an electrical charge, right? And so that cerebrospinal fluid flows from our low back L2 area all the way up the spine and around the brain in our encephalon. And if we mark a molecule of that fluid, then science shows that that molecule will actually do 2 full cycles in 24 hours. So it's our circadian rhythm. That's very interesting, right? The more interesting part is if we activate that cerebrospinal fluid through breathwork or meditation, then we'll speed up that rhythm. And when we speed it up, once that cerebrospinal fluid gets into the encephalon, it opens because of the increased pressure, the phallic gate, and it touches the crystalline structures of our pineal glands. And most of your listeners know already what I'm going to say when that charge of the cerebrospinal fluid hits the piezoelectric crystals of the pineal gland, we get a release of DMT and a release of the electromagnetic signals. And so we get into our subconscious, we get in contact with the universe, etc., etc. So what that does, we're talking about science, but at the same time, it shows how our soul resides, is what I think, in our cerebrospinal fluid, and we can connect with the universe and our higher being just by increasing the speed of that fluid. So that's a central nervous system. And so in step number one, we want to utilize tools to manage and regulate our nervous system, as well as our sympathetic, parasympathetic, and central nervous system. That's step number one. Step number two, release. And when we talk about release, we talk about releasing or clearing energetic and emotional residue that's in our body. Because we learned that our emotions are stored in our body, right? When we think about Mother Nature and we look at animals in the wild, just think of the last time you saw a documentary about animals in the wild, and the tiger, for example, is chasing the antelope, and the antelope barely escapes the tiger with its life, and they zoom in on the antelope, and what you see is the antelope is trembling. for just 60, 90 seconds. And then it starts grazing again as if nothing happened. And that's what's supposed to happen. We're supposed to experience our emotions for 60, 90 seconds, and then the emotion leaves our body. But as humans, we have to learn to suppress those emotions and not feel those emotions. And we don't close the loop. And we don't close the loop, they are stored in our body, since childhood. So our body is full of extra weight from trauma and emotions. And so step number 2 is releasing those residues from burnout and from trauma. And so we need to learn to access and process those emotions that are stored in our body. We need to learn to let go of fear, of worry, of jealousy, of self-sabotage, of frustration, of anger, and replace or make space, and then put joy and clarity and peace and those types of things in those spaces, right? But we need to clear that first. And that's where somatic therapy comes in. That's where I do a lot of TRE, tension and trauma release exercises. That's where somatic breathwork comes in. So Trish knows I do a lot of breathwork sessions where I really activate the body, do somatic breathwork, and let those stored emotions from the past, let those release and let them go without having to reliving those experiences, because that's what we call psychotherapy and talk therapy. And often those therapies do not work because they don't let the emotions that are attached to those memories go. I think I can't remember his name right now, but what he said was, a memory with an attached emotion is basically trauma. But if we have a memory and we let the emotion of that memory go, then we have wisdom. Then we can talk about an experience and teach an experience without personally be affected by it. So that's basically step number 2, is we need to learn to feel our emotions so we don't store them anymore. And if there's any old emotions, we need to bring them to the surface, not relive the experience, but let that emotional baggage go. So we create space and we, again, expand capacity. So that's step number 2. Step number 3 would be rewire. And so that's where we talk about conscious versus subconscious. And we talk about subconscious minds, and people envision that we have a conscious mind in the skull here and our subconscious mind is somewhere there. But our subconscious mind is basically our body. Our body has all the knowledge. Our body has all the wisdom, right? We know our cerebral spinal fluid, and our soul is in the body. So the subconscious mind, you can start thinking of, that's your body, and your body has all the truths that you need to know. That's why I teach people a lot of body intelligence, because we can ask our body what we should do, what the truths are, etc. But when it comes to this phase, it's about realizing that our conscious mind only absorbs 2-3% of the information that comes to us. For example, you guys are listening to me right now, that will be processed and stored in your conscious mind. But everything else that comes to you during the day, whether that's language, whether that's sound, whether it's frequency, whether that's emotion, whether it's body language from other people, something out of the environment, those millions of messages are accepted by our subconscious minds. They're not judged. There's no filters. And so that's where all the information lies. And so we need to learn to put our ego aside, access the subconscious mind, because that's where we will be able to rewire. Now, what do I mean with rewire? Many of us, and I experienced this myself, many of us have subconscious belief systems. And so an easy example is, because just before we started, we talked with Wayne about our bank account, and we want more money in our bank account, right, Wayne? So many times we say, okay, I'm going to be successful. I'm going to work harder. I'm going to make sure I can provide for my family, and I don't have to worry about money anymore. And the intention can be 100% pure, and the conscious mind can be 100% on board. But if your subconscious, which is responsible for 97% of the information that you store, but also 97% of your identity and personality. If your subconscious is not aligned with that idea, the subconscious will always override the conscious. So it doesn't matter what your intention is, you're never going to be financially wealthy, because your subconscious may have a program that says money is evil, and rich people are bad, because that's what your dad used to tell you at the dinner table as a child. And when you heard that and you subconscious programmed that, that's always going to override your conscious intentions. So now you can understand that it's very important, if you want to elevate in life, if you want to reach goals, if you want to create the desired life, you need to be able to put the ego aside, access the subconscious, see what programs are running, deinstall those programs, put them in the deinstall them, defragment them, get away from them, and install the desired programs. And if you don't do that, no matter how good your intentions are, you always will hit a ceiling, and you never will, realize your dreams. So it's so important to know what your limiting beliefs are and the programming that's going on inside of you, to then replace those with the programs that you desire. So this is all about rewiring into the subconscious space through breathwork, meditation, stillness, and all those things. You can learn to access that and simply, install new programs. And then the last part is rising, right? Stepping into your highest, I would say, frequency, right? Becoming the creator of your own life. And so that way you can experience and embody peace and prosperity and abundance and freedom and liberation. Because it's a process of liberation. If you look at it, is take all those masks off, right? And in order to do that, or how you need to do that, is to know how to increase your level of consciousness. And one of the best graphs or things that you can look up, which helped me a lot, is the Hawkins scale of consciousness, right? From 0 to 1,000. If you don't know what I'm talking about, look it up, because most people operate very low, below 200, which they operate in a frequency of what? Fear, worry, shame, self-blame, self-sabotage. And if you look around, most people are in that frequency. And when you operate in that frequency, you only can create things at that frequency. Whether it's a new business or a relationship, it's going to be created out of fear, out of jealousy, out of shame. And so nothing good can come from that. So in order to elevate your life, you need to elevate your level of consciousness. And so, what that means is you need to start operating from empathy and acceptance and love and peace and enlightenment and courage, right? All frequencies above 200. And so you got to start doing things differently, right? Not judging people, saving that turtle on the road, not killing other people, and understanding that I am you and you are me, and we're all that same sacred geometry. And the more you experience that through embodiment, and the more you understand that and also see it as an observer, the more you're going to increase that level of consciousness. So these are daily activities that you can start implementing to operate from a different frequency. And that's basically the rise. And so when you regulate, release, rewire, and rise, and you continue to work on those 4 steps of my method, it's a pretty steep and exponential step towards liberation and freedom. So that's my R4 method, Trish.
I just put the chart that you said, the Hawkins, into the Healerverse community group chat on Telegram. And I have a lot of notes in the corner. I was taking notes the whole time. If anybody wants to just go and scroll up and copy and paste, I'm the ninja note taker on Fridays, 10:30 to 11:30. And right now it's 11:08, and those are magical numbers. So, yeah, I'm so inspired right now. I was already fired up, Dr. Mike, but now I'm even more fired up. And yeah, I'm just so grateful that we have this on Fridays, and ninjas like you are part of Healerverse, and we get to celebrate you and learn from you and everything. And this has been incredible so far. So I really appreciated that. Would you be able to give us 3 to 5 practical things that we can start to implement right now?
Yeah, of course. Again, besides the R4 methods, which you can find in the book on my website, I got a free resources page too. So just visit it. There's no cost to any of this. But I would say, yeah, I'll share a bunch with you, and we still have some time. So I'll do a few small exercises too with everybody that's listening today. So first, I would say start creating space for stillness, because most of us spend our lives surrounded by noise, right? Phones, emails, social media, responsibility, and endless distractions. And yet, some of the most important answers in life don't arrive when we're busy. They actually emerge when we're quiet enough to hear them, right? Because everybody screams, but our higher self, our God, our source, whatever you want to call it, doesn't shout at us, it whispers at us, and in order to hear them we need to be still. So my first tip would be, to put aside even only 10 minutes a day of sitting in silence, so you can begin to reveal thoughts, emotions, and patterns that have been operating beneath your awareness. So I just did this exercise in a live breathwork session, and people were very surprised by the profound effects of it. So it's only going to take a few minutes. So let's do it, I would say. And I'm not going to reveal why it's for yet, but first, just listen to me, pay attention, and then we're going to do it again. And I'm going to ask you to do something, and then we'll kind of briefly discuss what the experiences are. But just listen to me right now. Okay, here we go. Om Namah Shivaya means honor the divine consciousness within. Loka Shamana Tsukino Bhavantu. May all beings everywhere be happy and free. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace for myself, peace for others, and peace for the world. Okay, now that's my best Tibetan, by the way. Now we're going to do this again, and this is the exercise. You're going to listen again, but at the same time, place a little bit of awareness on what you are thinking. So place a little bit of awareness on what you are thinking while you're listening to me. You guys ready? Here we go. Om Namah Shivaya. Honor the divine consciousness within. Loka Shamana Sukino Bhavantu. May all beings everywhere be happy and free. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace for myself. Peace for others. Peace for the world. That's it. Any reactions? What did you, placing awareness, are your thoughts? What did you experience, if anything? Anybody?
Hey, Mike, I'll go.
Yeah.
I had visions of it's like a cloud storm, but it's not a bad storm. It's a moving energy coming across.
Okay, good. Anybody else? All right. So
I had a
this
lot of,
is,
I had a
yeah,
lot of
go on.
peace. I had a lot of peace.
Yes, good
Yeah,
to hear.
a lot of peace
So,
in my body.
yeah, well, that's good. So here's the thing, right? A
I think
lot of you,
Natalie also wants to share.
yeah, go ahead.
Hi. So, yes, it was a lot of peace, a lot of love, and it's just a feeling of knowing, of just being.
Yes, you guys hit it right on the nail because here it is, right? When words don't mean anything, it's the stillness. Because you remember, in the second time I did it, I took longer pauses. The power is in the stillness. And when you're listening, I asked you to put awareness on your thoughts. And ideally, there were no thoughts. You had no thoughts. You were in stillness, right? You were not thinking, you were in stillness. And so a good exercise is when you talk or you tell yourself mantras. It doesn't have to be in a strange language. You can make your own mantras, right? One of my English ones is I am you, you are me, we are sacred geometry. You can make up your own mantras. But what you do is you're going to take pauses between the words and make those pauses longer and longer. And you can do this for yourself and you can just do it in your head. You don't even have to speak the words. And it's if you lengthen those pauses, you will be in peace because you are simply present in the moment and there's stillness. And that's when God, our source, or your higher self, when you get used to this, start whispering. So it's a simple exercise for the average person to experience stillness for the first time in their life, or for an experienced meditator to still have something very quick to experience that peace and stillness. So next time you use mantras, think about how powerful that stillness is between the words. So that was a little exercise that we can start using. Cool?
Mike Danielle wrote in the chat, she wrote, feeling curious about myself, inner higher self, wanting to hear from me.
Wanting to hear from
She wrote,
you?
Fe
Yeah. Oh, from
feeling,
herself, her higher self.
yes, yep,
Yeah,
yes.
that's perfect because that's why stillness is so important. Most of us are uncomfortable with stillness. Why? Because we don't know what to do ourselves and we don't know ourselves. So it's a very strange, awkward moment when we first start to experience stillness because we always want to do something. And that's why you need to get out of the comfort box and start sitting in stillness 10 minutes a day and build that up. Because that's when when emotions come up, that's when your higher self starts whispering things to yourself. That's when you start recognizing patterns and you can become your own observer. And that's how it starts. And that's why it's a powerful exercise to start sitting in stillness. A lot of messages will come to you. It's your higher self talking to you. The persona in the movie or in this matrix that is doing. Your higher self is the creator, and you need to start separating those two so you can start to create and change the direction and you want to go instead of just looping into habits and subconscious programs. And stillness is one of the most powerful things to create that, like you guys said, peace, but also creating that distance and starting to be aware that you are not you. You are always wearing different masks, and the true you is deep inside of you. And you gotta, first thing is start listening to that person, the true self, and then a lot of things will unfold from there.
Bev wrote, I felt my spirit sending lots of love out to the universe.
Yeah, and those mantras are very original, common mantras, right? And so the words are important. That's why I translated it. So our body absorbs those words with the frequency and hopefully with the emotion behind it. And those become subconscious programs too, right? So when you receive love, you can send off love because we are a toroidal field. Whatever comes in goes out. That's why your thoughts, the word you speak, are so powerful. And so we need to We need to, that's one of my other things I was going to do. We need to become the observer of our thoughts and our emotions and not judge them if we're self-sabotaging ourselves, if we're talking down ourselves, if we're judging other people, but observing that and then reframing those and making our words and our thoughts much, much more powerful at a higher frequency, because whatever goes out must come back. That's why I just talked to a pastor of a local Greek Orthodox church, because people talk about praying, right? And we can change that word to manifesting if you want, or the secret, right? But it doesn't matter. It's all trying to send words out there, and hopefully somebody listens. But that somebody is you, right? It's our higher self. It's the universe. So when we speak a word, yes, that's important, but that's just an electric frequency. But there's 3 steps to manifesting in order for it to work. Number 1 is, yes, you got to speak the words, but number 2 is that's your subconscious, that's your intention. Your subconscious needs to be aligned with those words, because if your programs, your subconscious beliefs, your limiting beliefs do not believe what you're saying, it overrides them. So you can pray to your God as much as you want, but you won't get a response if your belief system doesn't match your words, your intentions. That's why in the R4 method, that rewire step number 3 is so, so important, because you can put in all the work and you can, say those mantras a million times and your intention may be good. But if you say, I'm going to be a millionaire a million times, but deep down your belief system is rich people are bad, it doesn't matter how many times you say it. So number 1, your subconscious, your words, your body needs to believe those words. And that's why there's many tricks that we can help you with. You can put the word why in front of it. Why am I a millionaire? Which is not creating as much resistance with your belief system. And now your subconscious is going to say, oh, I'm already a millionaire. I got to catch up with what my body wants, right? So the word why. Or start with, if you're making 100,000 per year, now start with, I'm making 200,000, because your body doesn't resist it as much as saying a million, right? So there's tricks to it, but the best trick is to go to the subconscious and do the rewire. And then number 3, when you put those words out there and you actually believe them because your conscious, subconscious are aligned, now there needs to be an emotion behind it, because that's the magnetic component of the electromagnetic frequency. It needs to be an electromagnetic frequency going out there, and by law, it must come back to you, right? But you got to send it out with that emotion. So when you visualize, when you manifest, when you speak those words while you're in a subconscious state, pretend it already happened and put those emotions behind it. That's why it's important to learn to start feeling emotions in the moment. Somebody pisses me off, I can get frustrated and angry. Don't suppress it. Feel that frustration. Feel that anger for 60, 90 seconds so it moves through you. And once you actually start feeling your emotions, you can start actually managing them, playing with them, and also create emotions, right? Because we know that if we think about a grateful moment in our life, then that emotion that was attached to it, we can bring that emotion into the present moment, right? So we can start playing with emotions, letting emotions go, but also bringing emotions up that would serve a certain purpose in this present moment.
Hi, may I ask a question?
Yes.
Um, Thank you so much for your share. This was incredible. Um, yeah, so I have a question for you. Like I know you said your brother had passed when you were younger. Is that what prompted you on this journey, or was it constant like things, you know what I mean? Like, 'cause most
Yes.
people have something, right? And then they dive in deep, right?
Excellent question. No, at the time I was in my 20s myself. I was wearing all these masks. Looking back, I know I was doing everything for acceptance in my life. I needed to be the best swimmer. I needed to win this. I needed to have those degrees, because every time I accomplished something, that's when I got a pat of the back of my family, my friends. That's when I got a moment of recognition. And unfortunately, yeah, those accomplishments are great, but my life is based on that. And so most of the time people label that as childhood trauma, right? I wouldn't call it trauma, but it's how we become who we are, is wearing all those different masks just to feel safe. And that's where the nervous system and things come in. But to answer your questions, no, at the time, I grew up and there was no emotion in my family. My parents, grandparents, there is no emotion. They didn't teach emotion. They didn't have the tools to teach me how to deal with emotion. So emotions were non-existent in our family, right? So when my brother died, I did not know how to deal with it. I didn't even know how to feel. And so what we do is what we always do. We just keep working. We just keep solving problems. We don't sit in stillness. We just keep busy. And from the outside, it looks like, oh, Mike's fine, right? On the inside, I know something shifted, but I can't label it. And I'm pressing it down because I'm scared of feeling it, right? And so looking back, it's something I recognize. And I would say a few years ago, I've been doing breathwork, and I was a participant in a great breathwork session. And a few days later, in the middle of the night, I remember Thursday, 3:30 a.m., I get this incredible bad pain in my left groin. And my girlfriend wakes up and it's like, what's happening? I don't know. I never have pain. I don't have any physical symptoms, and I didn't work out too hard. We're trying to figure out why I have this 9 out of 10 pain, and I can't do anything. And suddenly dawned on me, oh, this is probably an emotion release. And so the next 7 hours, I had to deal with that because it was my first emotional release and I didn't know how to handle it, right? Basically, I had to just let the emotions come up and feel them versus fighting them. And it took me 7 hours. Hopefully, most people, it doesn't take that long, to actually grieve my brother. And the way I knew it was my brother is because I got pictures of him. I didn't relive the moment, but my subconscious was telling me, you didn't grieve your brother, please let it go. And once I finally started crying and letting go, that pain was suddenly gone because I've been teaching, The Body Keeps the Score, right? That book from Van der Kolk, the Dutch guy. And I've been teaching it and it makes sense to me, but teaching and knowing it is not the same as experiencing it and embodying it. Because now it doesn't matter how much science come out. I know what's true because I felt it. And as soon as I cried and let everything go, that pain disappeared. So I know that the body keeps the score, right? I experienced it. So no, that was, to answer your question, there was more of a reflection to the things that happened in my life, and I kept suppressing it. And now I'm dealing with it and liberating myself from all those things.
I love that. I love that. Thank you so much for your
Uh,
share.
you're welcome.
We have a similar journey. I too over accomplished just to prove my worth, not only to my family but to myself, right?
Yeah.
And then realizing that I am worthy, I am enough as I am, is a
Yeah,
very powerful thing, right? And you can do anything once you realize that.
that's right.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was an awesome question. And thank you for answering that. I cried for a year when I got sober in 2014 to 15. I cried for a year. Yeah,
Yeah.
literally. And actually, Nathalie just wrote in the chat, I just spent a full year of release. I relate.
Yeah. It needs to come out, right?
Yeah, that's what's so good about the stillness, like you mentioned, because I think a lot of us use accomplishments to cover up trauma, which is great. We have degrees, we have cool experiences from that too, right? But
Yeah.
then we hit a point where it stops working.
Excellent. Yeah. All
Yeah,
right. I have a few more if we have time, but it's up to you guys.
absolutely. For you, all day.
All right. All right.
Yeah.
Well, of course, we are already mentioned breathwork. That was kind of my first things that happened to me that made me realize certain things, because I was in San Diego at a conference and I got a good connection with somebody, talking to somebody. His name is Travis Steffens. He's a great breathwork master. And he said, why don't you come to my session tomorrow morning? I said, sure. And I never really had done breathwork, but in the past, being a swimmer, I tried meditation and I went to a few classes. of meditation, and I couldn't quiet my mind. So after a few times, if something doesn't work, you do what? You give up, right? So it didn't work for me. So I didn't have any expectations. I walk into this breathwork class, and it's like 2-3 hours of holotropic breathing, which I didn't know anything about at the time. But for the first time in my life, I experienced stillness, and my mind was quiet just because I was so focused, just like an athlete, so focused on the breath that nothing else existed. And that's when I first experienced that stillness and that subconscious idea. And so that's when I really got myself into breath work. And now I'm teaching a lot of breath work, right? So the second tip I want to give people is to pay attention to that breath, to your breath. Your breath is always with you. It doesn't cost anything, right? And your breath is one of the few, if not the only tool that can influence your body, your mind, and your nervous system in the present moment, in real time, right? So most people don't know, and that's the first thing I tell people to start practicing 1 or 2 simple breaths before you get into a real breathwork session where you release emotions, etc. Is to let's practice what I call a normal breath or an optimal breath, which is 5 counts in through the nose and about 5.5 counts out through the nose. Why? The mouth is designed to talk and eat. The nose is designed to smell and breathe. Why do we know that? Because in your sinus cavity, that's where our nitric oxide is. And so if we breathe through the mouth, we bypass that. If we breathe into the nose, we capture that nitric oxide, which is a vasodilator, getting that oxygen deeper into the lower lobes of the lung and deeper into our tissues and our cells. So we are designed to breathe in and out through the nose, number one. If we do that 5 in, 5.5 out approximately, we only would take what? 5-6 breaths per minute. Right now, most of us are breathing 16, 20, 22 times per minute. So our energy efficiency would drastically increase. Our longevity, our health would be drastically affected. Learning on how to do that. So let's do maybe 2 or 3 rounds with everybody of breathing in 5 counts through the nose and exhaling 5 to 6 counts out through the nose. Let's just do it. So exhale your old air and breathe in through the nose, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and exhale through the nose, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. One more in, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So guys, it may be a little bit uncomfortable, but if you practice this, it becomes your nature, it becomes a habit. And so that's one of the first steps you need to learn, even when you sleep, is have that, make this your normal breath. You're going to live longer. You're going to be much more efficient with your oxygen. And there's other things that we don't have time for. You need to increase your CO2 tolerance also, but we don't have time to talk about that. But start practicing a normal optimal breath. And then number 2, I would say, is very important for all of us that are striving and going. We're in sympathetic. Your breath is probably the most powerful tool to immediately shift you from sympathetic into parasympathetic. When you're stressed, when you're overwhelmed, when you are reactive, when you are disconnected, just pause and take a few slow breaths. You only need to exhale longer than you inhale. Whether you do it through your nose or your mouth, it does not really matter. For example, let's do this 2 or 3 breaths, right? Simple. We're going to breathe in 3 counts through the nose and then 5 out through the mouth. And it's going to automatically, because the breath impacts the vagus nerve, automatically shift from sympathetic, strong and stressed, to parasympathetic, rest and relaxed, right? And you can use that in the car, at work, before a meeting. You can use it all the time because your breath is with you, right? So let's do it. Exhale old air in through the nose, 2, 3, and out through the mouth slowly, 2, 3, 4, 5, and in through the nose, 2, 3, out through the mouth, 2, 3, 4, 5. One more, in through the nose, 2, 3, and out through the mouth, 2, 3, 4, and 5. If you do this 30 seconds to a minute, no matter, you can always get yourself out of that sympathetic, reactive, disconnected, stressful situation where your higher functions don't operate because you're running from a tiger, to a parasympathetic state where you have clarity, where you can make better decisions, where you're not reactive, etc. So very simple, your breath right there. And then what I would suggest is develop a daily breathwork practice. I've witnessed breathwork help people access that clarity, release those emotional burdens we talked about, and reconnect with themselves in that stillness, in that subconscious mind, right? So breathwork, I do a lot of breathwork. I'll be happy to help you there. Third, we talked about that a little bit, is you really need to become the observer of your own life. So the things you can start doing immediately, several times during the day or throughout the day, pause and simply notice as an observer what's happening, right? Observe your thoughts without immediately believing them. Notice your emotions without judging them. Pay attention to your reactions, because your reactions, your triggers, the stories that your mind automatically creates, start observing them a few times throughout the day and ask yourself, who is observing all of this? And that simple shift from reacting unconsciously to observing consciously creates just space for choice, right? Because you may not control everything that happens around you, your environment, but you can always choose how you respond. And as your awareness grows, those old patterns begin to lose their grip on you. You become less a product of your unconscious conditioning and more the conscious author of your own life. Okay, so become the observer and take time during the day to do that. You will be surprised what you observe on what you're doing, what you're thinking, what your emotions are, how you're suppressing them, how you react in traffic, and all those types of cool things. And then I would say number 4, start becoming curious about your triggers. Because the people and situations that frustrate us most, usually family, husband, significant other, your kids, they often reveal some important information about ourselves, right? They're in our lives for a reason. And so instead of immediately blaming that outside world, ask yourself, why is this affecting me so strongly? Why am I triggered? Because triggers are often what we call mirrors. So they can reveal old wounds, limiting beliefs, unmet needs are part of us that are asking for attention and healing, right? So realize that, and when you're triggered, don't go outside. Ask yourself, why am I triggered? And that's when you go in stillness, and that's where you figure out some unmet needs are some old stories or some old limiting beliefs, and then you need to work on those, right? So mirroring and triggers are a very interesting tool if you have the courage to look inside versus blaming others. Another thing I would say, and then we're almost done, is forgiveness. Is start practicing forgiveness, because we know that the others may not deserve it, because it's not about the people that we need to forgive. It's about our peace and our freedom. Because I always say that carrying resentment is like carrying a backpack full of rocks up a mountain. And so at some point, hopefully you realize that the weight is affecting you far more than the person you're carrying it for, right? So I guess my last thing that I want to say is, after all those tips, is just remember that awareness always precedes transformation, because you cannot change what you cannot see. So rather than focusing on becoming someone different, focus on becoming more aware of your thoughts, more aware of your emotions, more aware of the stories that you have been telling yourself all these years. Because the moment something becomes visible, then change becomes possible, right? So in my experience, healing doesn't begin when we try harder. It begins when we see more clearly. And perhaps the most meaningful journey any one of us can undertake is not the journey toward becoming someone new, but the journey toward remembering who we have been all along underneath all those masks. And for me, listeners and Trish, that journey continues every day.
Drop the mic, brother. Not you, but the microphone. Oh, thank you
Uh,
so much for
let me do a quick,
everything.
I have a quick
Thank you.
question.
Oh, okay. Go ahead,
Hey,
Wayne.
1,000, but
to
one.
my neighbor, we can get together.
Yeah, no, I'd love to do that. It's interesting you said forgiveness, because I have somebody that kind of rubbed me the wrong way due to integrity, and I haven't forgiven him. What I have done is I've moved my energy away from him, so I just don't. I'm not in his space anymore, and
Mm-hmm.
allowed it to leave my head. I don't think about it, but because I'm friends with people around him, it does come up. Like, hey, you should come and hang out with us. Like, not if that guy's there. Like, so I've blocked that, right? So I think
Yeah.
sometimes we have a choice to remove ourselves from that, because it just affects us so much. So I think forgiveness is, there's a whole nother discussion, I think, on that part of it. But I do know forgiving um, others releases that backpack for sure.
Wayne, that's very interesting because there's two concepts here, right? The first one we can do a whole other interview on its boundaries. So you're correct. You don't want to have negative energy or low frequencies. We talked about low frequencies. So you need to set healthy boundaries, right? But so now you don't mix with old frequencies or low frequencies, which is good. But you need to take that extra step indeed, because you still are carrying some of that inside of you. So you need to let that instance, whatever happened, you need to let that go. And that's forgiveness. So the way to do that, and it doesn't have to take long, is you need to get into that still space, into that subconscious mind after some breath work with meditation. I don't know what works best for you, but need to get into that space. And you basically need to then visualize that person right in front of you, right? And tell them, I forgive you, right? And we talked about already how you need to say the words, you need to mean it subconsciously, and you need to put an emotion behind it, right? And you can say it a few times. I forgive you. I forgive you. I forgive you. And you can do that with anybody in your life. And then it's over, done and over. You don't have to revisit that anymore. You can do that in just a few minutes with anybody in your life to release that old energy, that emotion that's stuck there. And then that doesn't mean you have to avoid the other friends of the group, because once you forgive that, you need to start working on increasing that level of consciousness we talked about into the RISE principle. Because, for example, America is a great example, right? Blue and red, Democrats and Republicans, it's just this division. And so you have so many intelligent people that are in one camp or the other, and they're all intelligent, and people like, I don't understand why they think this way, right? But we need to be better than that, because Buckmaster Fuller said it best, right? He said, you cannot create something at the level you're operating at, right? So you cannot fight a system that's bad. If you believe our insurance system is bad, you cannot just fight it. If you believe the IRS is corrupt, you cannot fight it, because fighting is what? Fighting or competition is a low frequency. So you can never win. The thing you need to do is you need to create a new system to make the old one obsolete, right? And that's high frequency. So we need to increase our level of consciousness so you don't engage in that low frequency ever. What you want to do is, because I got very intelligent, good friends that are far left liberal, and I got also the whole Trump bandwagon people, right? And so I look at them both from a higher frequency, and I says, okay, they are battling in this frequency, and I'm not judging them, because that's the key. That's very hard to not judging them. They are on their journey, and at one point they will discover that there's no right or wrong. They are part of the whole. There's principles that are correct here and correct here. You are me, I am you. If you look at anybody in your family, your friends, any of the 8 billion people on the world, and you judge them or you don't like something about it, that's that mirror. There is a Mother Teresa in us, but there's also a Hitler in us at a certain extent, And so we need to look at that and start working within again on where is that part in within that we don't agree with. But raising your level of conscious means is I can see that point of view. I can see that point of view. You're not taking side because you're at a higher level, not looking down, but observing is the right word. Looking down is not a good word, but observing what's happening without engaging in any low frequency. And it's the same with your friends, right? If that person is there and you forgave them, you go there, but you're not emotionally affected because you have this frequency wall. You have set an energetic boundary, and you still can enjoy that group without being energetically or emotionally affected by that person. But you need to kind of become the observer of that person and feel even empathy for that person and see, okay, that person has childhood trauma. It is acting a certain way because that's their mask. And even narcissists, people always hate narcissists, but you got to think about it. They have no other tool to feel safe. And it's very sad. But the thing of higher consciousness is we need to become observers and almost not empaths, but kind of stand in their shoes and almost feel sorry for them without feeling sorry for them, is kind of observing where they are in their journey. And when you can do that, you can go to a party with all those friends with that individual and become the observer and almost become empathetic with that person and hope they are on their healing journey. Maybe even offer them help, right? Getting them part of Healerverse, for example.
Mike,
Observe, operate from higher consciousness and set those energetic boundaries. And you don't have to avoid the other friend group just because of that. You just work on yourself to be able to manage that. Yeah.
boom, drop the mic. Again. Thank you so much, Dr. Mike. You are a legend. Honestly, I love Fridays. I love you guys. I am so inspired and empowered. And check out Mike on Healerverse, 5dhealerverse.com. We'll see you next week. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.